Hello, everybody. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Georgiana.
And this is Wholehearted Loving, where we teach you simple tools for self-love and compassion to grow the muscles you need to be with big feelings, triggers, and overwhelming sensations in your body.
Whether you have active challenges in your life or relationships, or whether you're just here to learn to be kinder to yourself, we pull out all the little things that make life feel better, the things that give you a sense of hope and direction.
So if you're too hard on yourself or on others,
if you want to feel real, deep connection in your life and relationships,
even if you want to reprogram your inner critic while you're sleeping,
this is a great place to be.
So welcome, and we hope this episode brings you just the tidbit you needed today.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today we are talking with Jordan Gray, who's a relationship coach, among other things. I think money and sex and relationship, I think Jordan. Actually, a lot of things make me think Jordan. Before we get started, we're going to do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other in this podcast.
So, Jordan, you said you had no preference, so I'm just going to make one up. Are you good with that?
I love that. I'm totally down.
Okay. So, I think it'll tie in at the end, maybe why I'm going with this one. But for now, just let mystery live in the space. Okay. So, what do you notice you connect with when I say the phrase power pose? Right? And does that, Stephanie's like, huh? How does it make your body want to move? Does it want to embody some of that? Does it feel resistant to that? And so we just play in this way at the beginning of every episode. So do whatever your body feels pulled to do. And if you want to chat about it a little bit afterwards, you're welcome to. All right. So just noticing your connection, your personal connection with power pose. Maybe you're imagining yourself in that pose. Maybe you're actually taking on some of that pose in this moment. What do you notice happens to your breath or posture? As you connect to the idea of a power pose. When I just connected to my inner toddler that wants to shake her butt around wearing her diaper. I don't know why that came, but I was like, I got control of things here.
Toddlers are very empowered.
Right? Toddlers are super empowered.
Yeah. Talk about following your impulse. It's like cats and toddlers are pretty top of the food chain for just like, I'll do exactly what I want. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So if you want to share a little what you noticed, you're welcome to. No pressure to.
Yeah, I feel my posture stayed pretty similar. I definitely breathed more into my belly. So just, deeper, lower breaths. I think even, 4 or 5 years ago, hearing power pose makes me think of, I think Amy Cuddy is the author with the TED Talk, who was like, put your hands on your hips and do like the Superman chest up thing. I think for me in more recent years, it's felt generally, for me personally, just like performative and unnecessary. I'm just like, I think I'm just, I felt so ready and excited to do this call that I was just like, I'm there.
Yeah.
And, the deeper belly breath probably had any percentage of just communicating with my inner child, who I tend to think of as like solar plexus living, just being like, I've got you and this will be fun.
I've got you. This will be fun. I had a moment of imagining all three of our inner children here to have a little play together. I think, that'll tie into our ending body practice, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Jordan, I felt you become very still and like a warm simmering kind of feeling I got of presence. And this is always a neat contrast with me for you, because I really view you in that way. Like, you're very solid and peaceful. And I'm learning that for myself, right? So my power, and it'll depend on where I'm at in my cycle and my mood and whatever, but power poses used to just be, exactly what you're describing, the Amy Cuddy thing. And I can recognize a much more embodied, powerful sense that's quiet and still. And what I experienced just now was like karate, judo-y, choppy, like I was feeling like, which means I'm excited.
Yeah, it felt very like, I feel like my embodiment practice was how I spent the last 6 hours of my morning. Like, everything I did today was like leading up to bringing full presence to whatever play happens through this, of like, chopping and loading wood and getting groceries without listening to music, and just like doing laundry, where like a lot of home reno movement stuff is happening, and I was just like very with it. And so it felt like a musician going to their day job at the symphony orchestra can arrive thinking my instrument's tuned, and when everyone's tuning their instruments, I'm still going to check.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still going to be like, the tension on my violin strings could have shifted 2% just because it was cold outside. Now it's warm in here and things fluctuate. So yeah, for better or for worse, when strangers, when people in the world ask me how I'm doing, I check, which, isn't always socially asked for. But so yes, it's like, if you said there was a wave of stillness, it's like, yeah, I still check in. I don't just assume, I don't take it for granted.
I love that phrase. It isn't necessarily socially asked for, yet I'm going to do it because it's important for me, right? To show up the way I want to show up. Well, I thought it might be nice to love bomb you a little bit to begin.
Right off the bat? Oh,
right
boy.
Off the bat, how ready do you feel to receive? And that becomes our natural way of introducing you.
Totally ready.
Totally ready? Okay. So I'm going to feel into my body. Like, when I think about love bombing you, I'm seeing you on my screen. Like, I feel a lot of warmth, a lot of tenderness. We would not have this podcast if it wasn't for you. You played such a big role in my own becoming that we wouldn't be on episode, I don't know what we're on, 100 and something, doing this thing, putting ourselves out there without this big heart that you have. So I'm just going to let that land just for myself to have a little time with that. But I want to share with you why. Like, it's not just this wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be who I am without you, but there's whys, and I want to just sit with just that first knowing. Okay. This one was on the top of my list, I think, because it spoke to one of my deepest wounds. And I said, something that you have given me is permission to know my worth and my value and how I contribute to the world, without it depending on the letters behind my name. And I have learned to embrace my gifts and put them out there in the world because I'm watching you. I've been watching you all these years. And I mean, I haven't done tons of research on you, so I don't actually know your beginning story, your origin story. But what I got a sense of that you always embodied so well is, I know what I'm good at. I know what I can contribute. And you do it in this way without like screaming arrogance. In this, I just know deep in my belly, right? Even if I feel not confident sometimes, or I wonder if I'm on the right path, there's some part of me that knows that I have something to offer the world. And I think one time I read that, did you go to like film editing school or like something like that?
Film production school, yeah.
And I was like, this dude didn't even study this shit. Like, He's out there helping people feel good about themselves, helping people in relationships. And what I mean by that is you took an interest, something that mattered to you, and you learned about it. I think you took your studies very, very seriously, but not in that traditional society deems you must study in this way. And once you earn your paper, then you're qualified to add value to people's lives. And so watching you just do your thing, knowing that you hold value, you have something to give to people is such a gift to me. I'm like, oh, I'm getting shy.
Cute.
What else did I write here? Watching you, listening to you, I was like, oh, my people will be out there. The people who resonate with me will be out there. You know, one of my big fears before was, well, if I don't have the letters behind my name, and people can't get all their sessions paid for by insurance, why would they choose to come to me instead of someone they could see for free? And I remember at the time, I'm like, how does Jordan do it? You know, like, I don't think he subscribes to any of these structures. He's out there doing this thing. And I think you said this, or you hold this energy, and I just knew instinctively, like, there's going to be people who never want to pay a cent for the help they get in their life. And that's totally okay. They just won't come to you. And there's going to be people who would love to pay you to be supported by you, and they exist too. So can you hold on to that knowing? And like, I'm saying these things like they are life-changing, and maybe to you, I don't know if you hear them in that way, but I'm like, I would have hid in the basement doing my thing for decades and decades had I not learned to shift those two beliefs. Because I just grew up learning, don't be the center of attention. Don't, just be modest and humble and just quietly do your thing. And I feel like one thing about you that I notice is you don't quietly do a thing. Like, you do a thing. There's a piece to it, but like, you do it with such love and boldness. And I wrote here, you have a way of like embodying fire and being very direct, yet connected to a tender, sweet heart. And that's one of the things I love about you. So that's just, a little bit.
Thank you. I receive it wholeheartedly. Yeah, I have any tangential thoughts on the points of like the origins of some of those things, and yeah, I take it all in and appreciate it.
So thank you.
Well, I got some too.
That's why I'm holding off. I'm like, we'll keep it going, and then if it's still relevant, I can say things.
So what G just said about you don't do things quietly, I think there are some things that you do quietly, and observing and taking people in without comment, unless it's requested or maybe if you feel compelled. But generally, I'm thinking about a time, so we all met, or you guys met just before this, but we met in conscious relationship training. And I remember feeling so big. It was that specialness without wanting to be special thing. And my energy was all over the place. And I remember feeling invisible, but very visible, like trying to be visible, but secretly invisible, And one day, like years in, you and I were paired for a clearing, and you were just like, I have some things to say. And you said like everything that you observed and thought about me. And some of the range of things were like deeply impactful. Like I felt seen and not judged, and accepted and supported in a way that I just didn't know was like in you. Like I didn't know that you had even noticed, And I think at the time there was some dramatic nonsense going on, and you were like, I believe you. It's like, oh, thank you. Like your ability to, actually, this is probably a bit of another thing. You will say yes or no, without qualification, really clearly in a way that's peaceful. But you will then qualify it. But there's been enough of a gap in between you saying yes or no that it's like, oh, I'm not going to get an explanation. And then you'll deliver some, reasonable explanation without making excuses for anything. And it's just so comforting. And like, I've spent so much of my life feeling socially confused, and you offer none of that in a way that I find like reverse confusing in a wonderful way. I don't need to wonder with you. So I'm like, oh, I've got to wonder because I don't need to wonder. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't need to wonder with you. That's such a gift to the people in your life. Right.
Thank you.
What a fun way to start off the podcast for the receiver. This is great. And, well, I'm saying that, and I can also imagine any percentage of a given population be like, projecting themselves into my seat and being like, I would be squirming hearing this kind of stuff. It's like, no, this is great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not like feeding anything. It's just like, yeah, you can, I really like, she's passed now, but I picture Queen Elizabeth II of like, receiving like a gracious queen, just, doing her little like hand wave. It's like, someone presents the queen with flowers. She's not like, oh, you shouldn't have. Oh, no, I couldn't possibly. You're just like, yeah, I'm not saying I'm, Queen Elizabeth II. She lived 70 plus years of service to society. And, I'm not equating our global impact. But
I have faith in you. You can do it.
I'll get there. I've got my 7 years in me.
You got some years to go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was really nice, at least for me, to start this way and be able to share with you how you've touched me. And I know you've touched many, many people. And like, I am curious. Our first day, you and I meeting, was very significant in a lot of life lessons for me. I know at the time you had messaged me and it was significant in your own way, that meeting. I don't know how much of it is still clear to you or whether you've thought much about that day. It was probably like 8 years ago now. But like, for me, that day involved a lot of feeling and listening to my body yeses, which I did not have a history of doing consistently. I'm wondering if you're open to chatting a bit about that, like what that was like for you, that time period in your life, that day we met.
So the like emotional reality surrounding the event?
Yeah, the emotional reality surrounding the event. Like, I don't know, have you ever watched the movie Sliding Doors or heard about it? So I think if I remember correctly, it's like this person, and one day she takes a subway every day, and one day she didn't get onto the subway, and because she didn't get on, like all sorts of other things happen in her life, and they do like a side-by-side movie of like had she got on, right? I feel like you and I made certain choices that day that allowed for all sorts of things to align just perfectly so that we had a little gift for each other that day. I'm just curious. Yeah. If you wanted to say anything about that. And yeah.
Sure. So yeah, sounds like Sliding Doors is kind of like, V1 or V2 of butterfly effect. Do people hearing this have context on what happened on that day? Like,
They have no idea what happened on that day.
Okay. So give a summary of that and then go into the larger themes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to do that?
Sure. So I was book shopping at Banyen Books, a more spiritually oriented bookstore in Vancouver, Canada. And I was there with two friends. I was mainly just there supporting them in their book shopping. I was just around. And this cute little woman I'd never met walks up to me. I think I was near checkout. Maybe I was checking out. Maybe I was buying something.
Yeah, you were checking out.
Yeah. And yeah, she comes up to me and just like love bombs me in public and is in essence Your work has been impactful for me. It has shifted how I am in the world, especially how I am as a mother to my 2 young boys. And it has just meant a lot to me and been impactful. But it was like multiple minutes, and it was in front of the person who was, the teller, the cashier, checking out at this bookstore. So there's like a social component of like, other people, and at least one person is like seeing this happen. I don't know who this is. I knew your energy enough to know that you weren't going to like pull a knife on me. It was very just like sincere and genuine and extended. And I was like, all right. And yeah, I think this is at least 8 years ago. And so at that point, I wasn't nearly as practiced with receiving love bombs, especially from strangers. At that point in my life, I'd probably had fewer than 10 people in public ever say, I know your work and I appreciate it. And to date, that was by far the longest one. So I was like, okay, she's still saying stuff and it's really nice. And now she's talking about her young boys. And oh man, this is, I was having to breathe into it. And I was just like, thank you. This is so sweet. I really appreciate it. Like, I'm taking this in as best as I can. And mercifully, after 3-4 minutes of this, she stops and I go, okay. And I maybe tap one of my friends on the shoulder, maybe, and I just go outside and I sit on the ground with my back against the outside of the shop and I start bawling because you hit all the best possible emotional hot buttons of like, whoa, I was just very seen, and that was a lot of really nice stuff. And then I went back in and with my red eyes was like, that was impactful for me as well. Thank you so much. And the larger emotional context was I was 2 or 3 years into really accepting the immensity of my heart and my sensitivity. Integrating a lot of the 15-year-old boy parts in me that I'd disconnected from for the majority of a decade. And so having a total stranger be like, these things are totally felt through your writing and they're a gift and they impact me as a mom to 2 young boys. I was just like, well, this is the epicenter of, the most touching thing someone could say. And so I went back in and told you that was impactful for me. And we took a photo of me in a leather jacket with very red eyes from crying. And that photo still exists. And you've showed it to me on Facebook since then.
So I lived that moment and the year since. And I know that, you told me that day that was impactful. This is the first time I've heard you like tell the story. So that's impactful for me too, to be like, wow, like I didn't know, like you're giving me more flavor and more texture than I've ever had of like what that moment meant to you. And so I'm just sitting with that. I'm seeing Steph's emotion, like hearing all of that. Right. So thank you. Thank you for gifting me just with that experience to know what it meant to you. Right. Sometimes we don't get that opportunity to like really share from our heart with someone how they impact us, and then to also hear how that impacted them. So like, this is one of those moments where I'm like, wow, like this speaks for me to like say the thing. And this is something I think you really hold close to heart too, is say the thing. Let the people you care about know. Let people know how they impact you. And so what a gift. Can I share a little bit of like my version of that and like what I followed that day for it to happen?
Please.
Okay. So I had gone through like a horrible breakup, like just a shower floor. If I didn't have to get out of bed to take care of my children, I really just would rather hide under the covers forever kind of experience. And a pattern that I saw in myself is I don't know how to be alone. Like I don't know how to be alone in my house. I don't know how to not be in a relationship. And one of the tasks I gave, being inspired by my ex, was this man is really good at being alone. So let me hibernate. No social plans, no hobbies, no nothing. And just let me learn how to be with the ickiness initially of how it feels to be by myself. So I spent 6 weeks doing that. During those 6 weeks, I got an email from Banyen Books that said, oh, there's going to be this event called Living Your Heart's Purpose or something. And it's a book talk. And I was like, I felt the immediate yes of, I need to be there. I want to be there. Several weeks later, it's maybe a few days before the event, I get a reminder. And it says, don't forget, this is happening. And just so you know, it's going to be a bit of a group discussion. Which normally, totally my jam, like be vulnerable with strangers, as you can see. But I felt so tender and raw after hiding out with myself and learning myself that I was like, am I ready? Am I ready to go out into the world, And I remembered, there was the initial yes when you saw this event. Go with it. It means something. Just don't ask too many questions. Don't try to figure this out. Just go. So had I not listened to that, initial, there's a big yes here, I wouldn't have been at that store at all. So that was the first yes I listened to.
That's why you were at the store that day?
That's why I was at the store that day.
Didn't know that.
So then, sitting at the talk, and the person says, as a society, we don't really value seclusion enough. And I was like, what? And he said, but the important thing is to know when to come out. And I was like, what's happening? What is this person saying to me? Which is exactly my life right now. If I didn't decide to honor and discover seclusion, and if I didn't follow the impulse of it's time to emerge now, it would not have been there that day. Then he goes on to say, and if I have one thing to leave you with today, it's to find yourself a mentor. And he's like, I don't know, imagine the people you already know, people you haven't met yet, but choose someone who's going to mentor you. And so I let that land. And I sat there in the audience being curious about who the heck is that going to be? So that's one thing that happened, and it will make sense later. I'm sitting next to this older lady, and we're chatting. And she's sort of giving me mom vibes, my kind of mom vibes. And we end up talking about how, I think I asked her, if you wanted, if your daughter could give you something, what might it be? And we had built up enough rapport that seemed like an appropriate question to ask. And she said, I just want to hang out with her. I was like, oh gosh, I bet my mom wants that too, right? But somehow I could hear it more from a stranger than my own mom. As I turned to her, I see at the corner of my eye this tall, super tall dude that looks like Jordan Gray. And I was like, could it be the guy's stuff who I read on Facebook, But I'm talking to this lady about some pretty serious stuff that can't just bolt off on her. So I held that excitement and curiosity in my body. And then once that wrapped up, I'm like, I gotta go look. And so I'm running through Banyen Books, being like, what did he see? Where did he go? Is it him? And so it was following that. Yes, it's not dismissing it. It's not saying that's ridiculous or whatever. Oh, he's probably gone already. It's no, the energy in me is, where is this guy? I have things to tell this guy. And then you were at the cash register. And then I was like, is this crazy? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Just go and just say the thing, right? And that's when I said, excuse me, are you Jordan Gray? And that's how that exchange started.
Wow. I knew of the recent breakup. I knew none of the rest of that.
Mm-hmm. So I said all those things. I meant every word. And then we parted ways, right? I was supposed to go meet a girlfriend at Kit's tennis courts to play tennis. I suck at tennis. She sucks at tennis. I don't know. We wanted to play tennis. And I went to the bathroom And then after that, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to linger and look for this other book. I don't even remember what book it was. But something said, don't worry, your friend is cool. She'll totally understand if you take a little longer. Just look for the book. You really feel the pull to look for the book. So I stayed at Banyen when I was meant to already leave. So when you came back in, I wasn't meant to be there. So that happened. And then to add on more to that, one of your friends was waving around Phil's book and raving about it. And I'm like, oh, what is this book? I'm curious, right? And he's like, well, I got the last copy, but, this guy's doing a talk next week. I'm like, oh, great. I'd love to make it, but I have my kids, can't come. Anyways, went home that night. The next day, I was like, I need people like that in my life. I need to feel like what I sensed about the three of you was there was intention in the way you connect with people. Right. And I was like, I want that. I want community. I want that feel in my life. But I'm like, I don't know where that's going to come from. And then I remembered this author, this book that your friend's waving around. I'm like, let me go look up the dude. Like, who's this author? And I read his bio. I'm like, that guy's my mentor. So it all came together. The day came together. And then you guys sent over the link and said, hey, he doesn't usually take strangers off the street, but, I think he might be open. Like, he trusts us. He might be open. And that's how I ended up at conscious relationship training, knowing not a soul, knowing I had no idea what I was signing up for. And just being like, well, I met this dude and his friends, and I think they're going to be there. And it literally changed everything in my life.
And I remember you didn't just have those thoughts that evening when you went home, you also verbalized that to us face to face. Like you said, I want more people like you, which I remember.
I said that out loud?
You absolutely did.
Oh
I respected the hell out of it. I was like, that's a really vulnerable thing to say to three strangers that you've met moments prior. Yeah, you absolutely said it to our faces when I came back with the red eyes and we had the photo moment. Yeah, you were like, I want more of exactly this in my life. Like, who are you guys? Where are people like you? And I was like, wow, that's good for her.
Wow. So that was me owning what I wanted and saying it out loud to even three strangers and following so many body yeses and not letting fear of looking stupid talk myself out of all these moments that led me to this connection with you. And I could have just said, oh yeah, I read your stuff. Great. Thanks. But I think I brought that 3-year-old toddler energy. Right? That super excited energy. And I don't know if that made a difference for you. If it would have been different if someone was just like, hey, I like your stuff online. Thanks. Versus, my 4-minute whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you had 100 reasons to not talk to me initially, to not stick around, to not say those things you said to the three of us afterwards. There's so many easy, rationalizations and ego outs to just be like, bother them and no, they don't care. And I'll find them on Instagram and send them a DM. There's so many ways to make it less human. And you didn't choose any of those. Mm-hmm. So you were clearly ready for this next wave, this next season of your personal life, of your career. You were just like, no, I'm ready to be bigger. Mm-hmm. Isolation was good. It's good to honor winter. And as far as I'm aware, every winter ever has been followed by spring. So you were like, okay,
it's time.
Let's do that.
So I'm curious, what your relationship is with following your body yeses. Have you always felt them? Have you always honored them? Or did you have some journey to come back into some type of healthy relationship with your yes?
I've almost always felt them. I definitely had a good chunk of years in my 20s that I proficiently suppressed them and was just like, I'm not interested. And they went away for a while to a large degree, probably not 100%, but enough that I was like, I don't care. And they believed me. And so they 90% got quieter. Have I always followed them? Absolutely not. Of course not. Show me a human that through their entire journey is like, oh yeah, every impulse, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
No, there were certain lessons I absolutely had to drag myself through the doorway, kicking and screaming, resisting them for years.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you talking about when you first started, it was around this time, and you were really digging into feelings, and there were a lot of tears. And I remember you telling me that you cried. I can't remember if you said 8 months or 2 years, like you just cried for 8 months. And
Yep.
your friends, like you couldn't go to the grocery store, your friends were bringing you groceries. And I remember being just like, okay, this is a visibly powerful, impressive human who's like successful and good looking and tall. And they're telling me they're crying at home. So I'm like, okay, so that's allowed. Okay, I can do that. I'm like, but wait, your friends are bringing you groceries? Like, that's also allowed? I had no idea. I didn't know you were allowed to feel and lean on people in these ways. And I think I attributed, I'm like, well, he's like really tall and good looking and popular. Maybe it's for popular people. You've been a gateway for my tears. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You're so welcome. I love the specificity of that memory. It was, so two separate things are overlapping that may have overlapped at all. I don't believe they did. So those are two separate seasons of my life. But yes, there were 8 months where I cried daily, where just like the bathtub plug. What are those things called?
That's good enough. Plug.
Rubber stopper in bathtubs. Like that chain got yanked, and like the energy started moving after a lot of years of white knuckling and denying and staying away from my heart to a large degree. So yeah, there was a lot of energy that was moving for those 8 months. And in a separate season, again, they could have overlapped at all, but I'm pretty sure they didn't. I pushed so hard in the early years of my business creation that I hit a very intense burnout wall for a few months. And so that was I couldn't go to the grocery store, not because I was crying daily, but because I was so flat on my ass. Like I couldn't walk a block without feeling vertigo symptoms. Like I couldn't walk. That was when I lived Cornwall at the beach, the beach that we're all very familiar with in Vancouver. I couldn't walk the 3 blocks to the grocery store. And for me, one of the main lessons of that burnout cycle was, I had to phone a friend who I hadn't really been that close with for like almost a decade. And for me, a guy I used to be in men's group with would say, like, sometimes getting sick is its own medicine. So I feel like that burnout, it forced me to be like, ask for help, you stubborn fuck. Like you can't eat unless you call someone. And I was like, I know maybe ironic with the burnout thing, but like I was health conscious enough that I didn't just want to like only, and cheap enough. They didn't just want to like, food delivery, restaurant meals for like weeks on end. Cause even then that'd probably get worse until some other thing got bubbled up that I would have to ask for help. So yeah, I had to phone a friend to be like, I can't walk a block without feeling like I'm going to like literally fall into traffic. Please come over and make me calories because I'll die if I don't ask you for help. Both those things, they were probably within the same year or two. But yeah, that, the stubbornness thing, the not listening thing. Yeah, I overrode my body for at least 2 years before the flat on my ass burnout thing, because you don't get there overnight.
No.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like in there are lots of old beliefs layered in, like the old beliefs, like what were the old beliefs around crying, around how hard you're supposed to work, around am I allowed to ask for help? Like what were some of your like old beliefs that really didn't take you to great places overall?
Yeah. I'd say that, the two main pockets. So on the emotional part, I mean, I'd had a good amount of bullying around my sensitivity, which when it's a fairly pronounced part of you from a young age, I think it's Ken Page he has a model around giftology that's like, our core wounds surround our core gifts, and our core wounds surround our core gifts because they're our actual essence. So there's the essence, and then people go, oh, that's a stupid essence. And we go, oh no, really? That's like the epicenter of who I am. And so we wrap, personality and reaction formation and different things around the thing. And then we grow a bit older, then we think, oh, am I this stuff? Am I the layer? Am I arrogant? Am I a jerk? Am I whatever? It's like, no, that's just the protective stuff. And so then, peeling off the layers of mud and getting back to the essence. So, beliefs around that part were, how emotional I am is disgusting. It's wrong. It's unattractive. And I had years, my real introduction to any version of self-help, like many men of my general generation, was pickup. Like, I read The Game at maybe 20 years old. And it wasn't like, oh, how fun I get to manipulate women. But it was like, oh, you can change anything about yourself. Like, that's a thing that's a thing. So that was a gateway drug. Initially very shame motivated, but it was a way in. It was the layer, not the essence. And yeah, I think I was just like, okay, well, if the biggest and most obvious part of me is wrong, unlovable, bad, a turnoff, and Phil, our mentor, I love the script precedes the actors. Like, there's the script in our minds, we cast the actors to play the role. So in the years, like magic, that belief was, if not running the show, in the mix. I exclusively attracted girlfriends, partners that agreed. We're like, yeah, like, your emotions do turn me off. I don't like it. It is gross. And I was like, well, 100% of women agree without fail. And there's no other feedback in the world. Just that. It's like, okay, like, that's what I got. And the moment that there was a sliver of doubt and I changed that also shifted in the people. Yeah, that was the emotional side. And the work side, it was less, I have to work hard, which I know a lot of people and a lot of men especially get. The whole, like, women are sex objects, men are success objects. And if your wallet isn't fat, then who the fuck are you? Like, men get a lot of that from quite a young age. For me, it was less that and more my first 2 or 3 years of building the business that I've been working in for 16 years in the line of work, but 12 years next week. While there was any love and kindness and compassion and permission in the mix, it was absolutely fueled 90+% by disproving my worthlessness. It was not, how do I be of service? It's, I'm clearly a piece of shit. How do I reverse that trend and just beat the new identity into existence in away from motivation? The rocket ship leaving, using 90% of its fuel to get away from Earth so it can coast in space. It was very that. Right. And so it was, quote unquote, effective, but it's exhausting. Dirty fuel sources work for a time.
Yes. I really like that concept of recognizing the dirty fuel sources, like, good for what it gave me and not sustainable long term. So what am I going to do about that? Because I think how I see you and Steph sees you is that something shifted over time, or many things shifted over time, where we do see you as someone who is being of service, right? So how did that shift for you over time? Was that like a conscious moment decision? Is it more gradual? Like, what happened for you that you're like, I don't want to do it this way anymore? Like, was it that conscious?
I'd say the awareness of it was a bit more light switchy, a bit more black and white. The doing, the integrating of it was absolutely multiple years. And I don't know. I don't have any here's how, if I could go back, here's how I would do it overnight. I don't think there is one. I think that our becoming is something that we chew on for years, forever. So yeah, I was aware of it. I knew that at some point the dirty fuel source overstays its welcome, and you have to replace it with something. But I didn't have the answer of what that was. So yeah, it was absolutely a thing I had to chew on for at least 5 years. And anyone can transpose this onto whatever their life experience is. Maybe you grew up with drug addicted, neglectful parents, and you're like, I'm going to be a parent unlike my parents. And that, what can be a loving and ego-driven intention can serve you. Like, you can be a good parent from that place for a time. But if it's always, oh, my parenting style is just not my mom, it's like at some point you go, okay, that's what I'm not. What am I? What values-driven thing am I going to lead from that, I also can't achieve, because the best values are just things like Kaizen. You do it a little bit better every day for your entire life. Yeah, it was absolutely gradual. I agree now, looking back a decade, it has definitely shifted. And yeah, I have zero shortcuts to recommend to anyone.
I love that you have zero shortcuts. It's a very human answer. Like, Steph and I have our way of saying this, but I'm curious how you would say it to people. Because you said, I knew something had to change. I knew it wasn't sustainable long term. I didn't know the how. It probably took me 5 years to, really see a big shift in that. How would you speak to, like, you did something though, right? And this is what I see in you, is like, you're someone who's like, I'm not going to sit there and be helpless. I'm going to do something. So like, yeah, how would you put that into words of like, just do something?
Yeah, I think there's a balance to be had. I'm thinking about rock climbing. There is a rock climbing style. Generally a newer rock climber who's a bit more anxious or frantic or doesn't like heights, who mid rock climbing run, burns a lot of mental and physical energy, like scanning and like reaching for the next thing, like physically, like trying and testing, and like maybe this, probably not that, this thing. Whereas the generally more experienced approach is to go, okay, I'm stuck, I don't know what the next move is. And so they put more of their weight on their feet and they lean back and they observe and they take in the moment and go, probably that. It's like cultivating that pause. And so that isn't me saying that the latter is the correct approach, because I mainly did the first one. I mainly just threw shit at the wall and was like, we'll see. Fingers crossed. Just stumbling my way through it. Totally.
Yeah.
I think, that stumbling my way through it and just like, to me, it's a more entrepreneurial spirit of like, if you want to progress, you 10x your rate of failure. How do I have how do I just fall on my face over and over and not make myself wrong for it? Like, self-compassion is a part of it, because if the inner critic is, so ready with the whip to be like, you did that, it's so dumb, then like, you're not going to take as many chances. But yeah, I think it's, my perception of it is that it's so it's such an individual process. Like, my growth edge for that was I needed more people. I needed to ask for help. I needed to be in community. I had absolutely cultivated an ivory tower of isolation where I wanted everyone in my hometown to know of me, but not know me. I didn't want anyone getting close to me and knowing me, but I loved being like, I know that these people like see me as untouchable. I cultivated it. Like, my ego sought that out. And so my undoing for at least that season was, how do I pendulum swing? How do I cry in front of strangers? How do I, have the red eyes outside of Banyen books and come back and be like, hey, this impacted me. You impacted me. Look, I'm a human with tear ducts. Isn't that crazy? Like, just letting that be was a part of that. So yeah, moving away from the ego-driven, away from motivation into more humanness, into more community, into fuller emotional expression, more self-permission. Like, there was a lot of layers of it.
My body feels so good hearing that. Right? Because you're really making very clear. I had to learn how to allow myself to pendulum swing, to try out the opposite a little bit and see what that might be like.
And more than a little bit, it felt like it felt like a complete death of like everything I've built up, like the ivory tower. I have to take a sledgehammer to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, what? I'm just gonna have more years of the same. Like I was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
So like I achieved the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really sobering moment when you get the thing that your ego, sprinted towards for years, and you hold it in the palm of your hand, and you're like, "Oh, I hate this. Like I really, really hate it." And so I was wrong. Clearly, my hypothesis was wrong. And so now what? I don't know. I've only practiced wanting to get to this finish line, and clearly, my hypothesis was wrong. And so, what now? I don't know, but like I need a new brain, a new identity, probably a close to new everything to even begin to have a semblance of where I should start pointing my energy next. But I was just totally in the dark. And so for me, throwing stuff at the wall was totally necessary. And I didn't have the bandwidth or, personality, way of existing as a default to lean back and observe. I just, I'd banged my head against the brick wall enough times that I was like, okay, something new.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can do with a brick wall. Right? Yeah. Eventually you step back and just look at it.
Now what? I really like that question. I think it's an important question. Now what? With the energy of wonder. Right? Now what? That old way is obviously not working anymore. And I think it's a big moment of facing reality.
Yeah. And I'd even add, for me, there's a caveat there of like, now what with wonder is something that at that point I would have had to graduate towards. It didn't start with wonder. I was nowhere near wonder. It was desperation.
Yeah.
And so if there's 1% of people that are, listening to this, watching this, who are like, oh man, I'm so not at wonder. It's like, that's fine. Like
totally.
You could be coming from a darker place, and wonder might be, 7th grade of like, okay, I've like got some traction. I'm starting to maybe have a semblance of direction. Like that's fine. Yeah. It was, just like disproving worthlessness was an early driver in building the business. Desperation, isolation, depression. It was a different form of dirty fuel source that was like, okay, this lay of the land does not work and I need something else. It was months, if not years, until I was coming from, like the fuel source had started to like trickle through. I'm picturing like where, fresh water, like salt water meets non-salt water. It's like, it wasn't one or the other, but they were commingling.
This is such a good analogy, the fuel source, because it's like we're inventing whatever, rocket fuel or some clean burning energy, nuclear fusion. And we've started with cow dung is what we've started with. And we're like, oh, maybe not this. Okay, maybe I'll try burning everything down. Also, it was warm for a minute, but not this. Such a good trajectory to notice and be sympathetic towards ourselves throughout.
Totally. Yeah.
Or at the end of.
I love that extrapolation of the analogy, because it's like the old energy source was like smelly and heavy and cumbersome, and we can find something that's more efficient, which is accurate.
Yeah.
Like the weight that it took, the number of major muscle groups it took to like willpower my way through the early stuff is so different to the flow and ease and peace that comes from going through that multi-year transitioning, journey to, just like the things that I can create with the amount of ease that I do from this place, from today, almost a decade later, is just like, incomparable. If I showed an hour of today's life to me 8 years ago, you would immediately start bawling. You'd just be like, are you kidding? Like, that's anywhere near an option. But yeah, it was hard won. It's like, there wasn't an overnight process. And I think that's, a big thing that I would tell early 20s me is just like, I don't think there are ways to streamline and make less painful, but I don't think, like, from the ego perspective, I don't think there's shortcuts. I think there's some things that are just like, and I think the ego hates hearing that. Like, again, 22-year-old me is like, you haven't read the right books. Like, there's no way that's anywhere near true. It's like, I'm talking like the deeper soul level, like, becoming is very a process. And I don't think we can, ABC, hit the shortcut video game hack and just be like, no, you can overnight that. Yeah, no problem. Same day delivery, here it is. No.
That's actually one of the experiences I had with you almost in passing years ago that really illuminated for me that I had developed self-compassion that I didn't know I had. Because I'm a finish, get to the end sort of a person. But this journey has felt, this healing journey, feels like, I'm in the middle of something and that's okay. Like, I'm going somewhere with this and I don't need to be at the end. You said to me, maybe we hadn't seen each other in a while, and you said, you're easier to be around. And I was like, sweet, that's what progress, and old me would have been like, oh God, like, did you at some point think I wasn't easy to be like, I would have immediately manifested all of the things that were so difficult to be around. And what a neat gift, your honesty and honesty with where we are in the moment.
Oh man, yeah, it's so funny. It's like, a more socially calibrated, normal way of saying that would just be like, "Oh, you feel so much more at peace with yourself." Like, there was, and again, what's the saying? If you spot it, you've got it. I can recognize, the like, this isn't the right word, but something adjacent to self-rejection, like the dissonance, the inner dissonance of like being quietly at war with myself. Like, I lived it, so like that doesn't startle me or cause me concern. I definitely don't judge it in others. I'm just like, yeah, totally. Oh, you're a human, I'm a human too. I remember that. Just like such a, oh, hey, old friend, of course. So yeah, the like, you're easier to be around is like, I feel the increased ease you have in your relationship to yourself. And like, oh, hooray. So that's funny. I totally believe that I said that. That would, yeah.
I totally believe you said that too. I'm like, I could hear Jordan saying that.
Yeah. And that's the way I took it. The honesty. We're mirrors in that way.
What did I want to say? I was reveling in a moment of like, oh yeah, I remember Jordan's energy in that way. You said earlier, if you looked at me then and you look at me now in certain areas of my life, it would make you want to cry. Is there any area you'd be willing to let us get a little glimpse into your life of like, what does that look? What does that mean when you say that?
Yeah. Several things. I mean, I think the biggest and most clear from, that 8-9 years ago to now is, I think, in those years, it wasn't my peak of it. My peak of it was probably like 13 years ago. But yeah, at some point in my mid to late 20s, I had a good chunk of time that was like, yes, any man that like gets married is an idiot and is just like choosing to enslave himself for life. And like, why would you kill your soul to that degree and just give up all of your freedom? And I just, I really thought that any quote unquote happily married man over 40 was just lying to himself and had just like found a way to manage the cognitive dissonance and was just dead inside. And that was a reaction to how I wanted nothing more in life than to have a loving, peaceful marriage. And, that was my way of, for just a few years longer, straight arming the notion that any person, but especially man, could be happy in that kind of a setup. And yeah, I've been with my wife for 6 years, and it has just, where the majority of my past relationships just felt like pushing a boulder up a hill. It doesn't even feel fair to say I've been like chasing the boulder down the hill. It just has there's no boulder. It's just, I'm picturing Lake Louise in Alberta, just this like open, beautiful postcard of like, yeah, I underestimated how the depth of peace I would feel once we went from, dating, engaged to married. I thought it would feel like more of a formality and, it's a fun title. I get to say wife. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, crossing that threshold, we both underestimated it of just like, oh, this is the greatest gift of my entire life. And so that was a big shift from, judging, demonizing, distancing myself from that at any point.
What are some of the things you thought you couldn't have?
Fun, hobbies, your own money, freedom, downtime. I thought just everything would have to be so filtered through, oriented around the thing that there would just be no room for self. Like I would just be like codependently, and I know the origins of it, but yeah, they're just like there's no breathing room to exist or have fun. I'm just like exclusively in service to only things outside of myself, which has any, actual heart-based validity, but that just sounded like prison.
Right.
To me in the ego-winning years.
Oh, this is my curious 3-year-old question. What do you love doing for your wife right now that you could have, like, old you would have never imagined loving doing this and like having come from a gracious place?
The first and loudest thing, because it was such a thing for me years ago, is being a provider. Like I'm somewhat saying this intentionally through the old filter, like buying her a house, paying for our lives, being the sole, income creator for the last several years when she took a hiatus. What's the word? Sabbatical. Took a break from work for a few years and just being like, okay. I mean, but yeah, there was like iterations of that when we were dating and renting versus married and homeowners. That was something for me from a very young age. Money was my only sense of safety. That was really what I conflated. No one in the world actually there for me. No one actually has my back. So what would safeguard me from abandonment, from people not caring about me forever? Way too much money. If I have a moat of cash around me, no one can mess with me. That was like when I was single digit years old, I had a lot of those thoughts. And so they were deeply in there. And so, yeah, that was a thing. Like I had thoughts that nothing became of this because it was ridiculous. But like I had thoughts of prenup before buying a ring, before proposing. I was like, oh, I have a couple of years of age on her. Our present day, our bank accounts are quite different. And like it would be the absolutely correct, wise, quote unquote, ego thing to be like, well, protect yourself, protect your assets. If this implodes, you're screwed. There are so many things incorrect with that, and I don't agree in the slightest anymore. But yeah, the like protect yourself at all costs, money is your only safety, don't let a woman ever get this close to you ever, versus it's the greatest joy of my life to be like, yeah, there's no more correct use of resources possible for me than every dollar I have made prior, today, and forever, everything is funneled towards you and our kids soon. And just like, yeah, like a prism laser beaming into like a single point. Like, how dare I do anything other than that?
And that's what feels true now, not because it has to be right, not because you're trying to pendulum swing, but it actually feels like inside feels true.
I do very little from has to. So yeah, that's just like, no, I'm not following correct social trends. If anything, some people have told me that that's the opposite of what I'm doing, and that, a more fair and equal marriage, should have everything financially and housework and every, just like, surgery, slice every possible part of your life so it's all 50% fair. I think that's ridiculous and a way to hide from life, and I don't agree with it in the slightest. I think different people have different strengths and should use their strengths and their leverage to bring the greatest amount of love to their relationships, to the world, to their communities. So no, it's definitely not like this is, this looks good or it's what I should be doing. And this is somewhat fueled by us living in a small town, but I don't think that's more downstream and not upstream. The deeper we've gone, the more traditional and less modern we have shifted, and it feels the best.
That's interesting. It feels the best. Socially unacceptable to not have a prenup. Feels the best to contribute all of my everything to this love and this situation we've grown. That's a huge shift.
Mm-hmm.
Right? From I must, I should, to I do what feels right.
Can you identify maybe where or when you sourced that information for yourself, how it shifted from I should maybe have a prenup to, oh, actually I want to do everything the opposite?
Where I sourced the old beliefs or the current ones?
The current ones, yeah.
I don't know if I got them from anywhere external. I don't think it was like I started reading different books or getting into different worldviews. I think it was just living it. It was just like crossing the threshold of buying the ring, proposing, being married, mainly being married. During the ring acquisition and the being engaged, that's on some days, that's when I was like breathing through the ego thoughts the most of like, oh, now you've really done it. This is, your life is ruined. On some days, not, it wasn't a constant through the engaged months, but yeah, I mean, it's always darkest before the dawn. The ego is going to loudly throw a shit fit before it's like, oh, I actually have less of a job with this person now. Noted, when they feel the threat of being replaced, that's terrifying. So it was very loud for the majority of a year that we were engaged. I think just crossing the threshold and, appropriately, my wife becoming more a part of my ego structure, just as Georgiana's children are part of her ego structure. And that's correct and healthy and fine. Not like oh no, why do I care about my kids more than the average stranger on some level? That's okay. You're a mammal. That's what's supposed to happen. I think I was just like, okay, she's my wife and I mean this, and I couldn't be more in. And there was a very clear to both of us, one of us dies. That's the only way this dissolves. So if there's no way out and we're treating each other kindly for all of our days, well then why wouldn't I go to the bank and make sure that her name's on every account? So it's just like, okay, there's no hidden pockets of money, there's no emergency fund, there's no secret storage locker of things that either one of us has to like, there's no skeletons in the closet. This is it. So it just, once I crossed that threshold of us being married and feeling the amount of peace that I felt in experiencing that, I was just like, okay, well then that's it. So
the amount of peace that I felt, right? It keeps coming back to like how good something feels, the peace. And you mentioned something that I think listeners I think people will find value in this. Like you said, the voices were loud for a year. A year, that's a freaking long time. So how did you learn how to be with those loud voices of fear, right, for a whole year and not let them drive the bus? Like, what was negotiating that like for you?
When I put any amount of magnifying glass towards those voices, they were only in my mind. And they were never in my body. Like my mind would be like, this is the stupidest thing you've ever done. Are you like, please stop this before you're actually legally tethered to each other. You could lose this and this, like, stop it. But I would be like, okay, is this like a deep gnawing tension in my solar plexus? Is my inner child being like, we don't like her. Like, actually get out of here. Nope, the exact opposite. No matter how much there was a tornado and how much chaos my mind was loudly throwing at me, I would just audit. How does my body feel when I'm around this person? And it was only ever totally open, totally spacious. Inner child, how do you feel? I love her. She's the best. I've never felt safer with a woman. Okay, well then that wins. Like, I don't care how loud or how convincing the mind chatter gets. It's just like, my body never deviated. Even as that stuff escalated, it was just monkey mind, head noise. I was like, okay, so what are we doing here? Do I live a life driven by the monkey mind? That got me to burnout and isolation and depression. Or do I live a life, especially future-oriented and progressively listening to the body, listening to the spaciousness, listening to the peace in my solar plexus? Yeah, that wins. Okay. So it's a gamble compared to the old stuff, but compared to the old stuff, there couldn't be anything that's less of a gamble. Like, that's just the only truth that my body was like, hey, no, we're good. This is the best, and we're thrilled.
We're thrilled, right? Like the audit, I think, is so key. That you said, no, like monkey mind is fine. That's there. That's the thing I love is you're not saying I didn't expect monkey mind to show up. You didn't make it wrong that it showed up.
I totally expected it. I was like, oh, this is going to be a gauntlet.
Right? You were prepared, like it's going to show up. It's going to show up in super creative ways. It's going to try to convince me that this is completely wrong and I'm insane. And if I'm willing to pause, take the microscope out, do the audit, the body audit, I'm going to get different answers, like closer to the truth. Right? I'm curious if someone would have told old you, dude, it's really about the body and like getting more in tune with it and starting to listen to the messages from the body. Right? What would you have said? Would you have said like, oh, I know, but I sort of love my mind? Or you'd been like, that's ridiculous. I think that's nuts.
You said old me as a blanket statement. And I think it really depends when, because if someone had told me that in my first 2 years of like, peak disproving worthlessness season, and so I was like, oh, just listen to your body. I'd be like, do you know how inconvenient and stupid that is? Like, no. I'm not doing that. I'm still squeezing a lot of juice out of the current strategy. I'm getting things out of it. And even if 8% of me heard that and would be like, they're probably right, I still wouldn't care. I'd just be like, I have to drive this into the ground before I'm actually willing to hear that. So if I'd heard it then, okay, cool. An ambitious loser. Who gives a shit what you think? Like, I would find a way to shelve it. And if someone told me that when I was, 29, 31, when I was already like starting into that, I'd just be like, yeah, I'm kind of getting whispers of that. So, I don't know if it would have expedited anything, but I would have been more receptive to it at that point.
That's also a really key thing of needing to get totally tired of something before you make a change, or needing to have tried the thing you're trying until it's done, and also letting that be okay.
Totally. Yeah, I think sometimes we just need to like squeeze all the juice out of it, beat it into the ground before we're like, okay.
Yeah.
That was that season. Now I'm actually ready for something new.
Yeah, without shaming ourselves for, I needed to burn that to the ground first. There have been many lessons in my life. I'm like, I needed to burn that to the ground first. I need to, like you said, that part of me had to die a slow, miserable death before it became clear enough for me. It is time for something new. I don't care if you crawl or whatever you have to do. It can't be that old thing anymore.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm not going to name names, but I'm pretty sure you would both be aware of this. Like in the early years of us meeting each other in person, there was a relationship that me and the person in question labeled as like, was this what's the phrase? We at the time we were in our 20s, but we would say like it was like our twin flame connection, which didn't mean the person you're supposed to be with forever. It's more the person that you have a head-on collision with, so you both learn some deep lessons and then carry that forward. Like we broke up, if I remember correctly, we broke up 9 times in a year and a half, and this is when I was, 10 years into like obsessively self-educating on this kind of stuff. And I'd been, coaching clients at that point for like 6 years. So like I was aware of, a percentage of things, and still we both just had to like bang our heads against our own particular brick walls that number of times until we're like, okay, we're on the floor, we're exhausted. Have we got our lesson now? And then we could like our ways integrate and like carry it forwards into our lives. And now we're both happily married. Actually, we had dinner with that woman and her husband like a week after they got married, just a month ago, which was really special. But yeah, it's like there are some things that just like, I had many loving, non-shaming, caring friends and family members tell me during that year and a half, hey, I think maybe, if you've tried 8 times, not maybe something, it's like, we had to go that many rounds until we're like, okay.
Yeah. Nobody's saying I didn't need to burn it to the ground, but I went ahead and did that.
Yes.
We didn't do it for fun, you mean?
No, it's all part. So if you're listening and you're in the middle of something that maybe is on
fire,
let that be all right. That's part of it.
I have to confess, like my heart broke when you two split up, because you were the part of me that wanted to like make something work and believe that like, no, I'm meant to be with that person. We can figure it out. Like so wanted to believe that was possible. And so when I found out that relationship ended, I was like, oh, this is the reality I don't want to face for them or for me and for what it, represented for me. And I remember actually years later, because I was like, oh, I'm curious how their lives what will evolve, right? And I'm like sort of watching both of you in the sidelines and really feeling like, oh, they feel closer to what's real for each of them, like as the years progressed, right? And like seeing you come into your new relationships, I'm like, my gut says that like they all feel happier, right? And like, how beautiful to hear the 4 of you have dinner together. Because, for me, I got to see that from the outside and be like, maybe something can feel better than this thing we think should work.
Totally. I mean, and talking about my engaged time of like mind against it, body for it, that relationship was the exact inverse of that. Of my mind so was like, square peg round hole, but still it was like, come on, like, but on paper, are you sure? But my body was the opposite. And I was like, I can't just willpower my way through this like I have been most of my life in other pillars. Mm-hmm. And then when she started dating her now husband, like the day that I heard of it, I was like, oh wow, you guys make like they were way better aligned, and I couldn't have been happier for her. And we dined together less than a month ago, and it was very sweet. And they're the sweetest couple and very happy. So it's
That
great.
alignment is such a discovery too. Like I remember meeting you guys and just thinking, oh, well, they're both like, I was very limited in my thinking. It was, they're both good looking. They'll work out. Like really not, they're sweet. That'll do. Alignment is something so much more specific and also emerges like all of this other stuff we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a curiosity. And like, if it's too personal, totally understand. What is it that you see in your wife now, or when you were first pulled towards her, that like an earlier version of you would have been like, no, like those are not my things. Like, cause I'm asking this because it sounds like you said in one relationship, like my mind was like, like I got messages, but I wasn't fully listening. So like, what do you value deeply now in a partner? Like you don't even have to attach it to your wife, but what do you value deeply now in a partner that earlier you wouldn't have valued in the same way?
I would say it's interesting when I kind of comb through her kind of major aspects. I don't know if there's no thing that I can think of that I'd be like, oh, younger or different me would have looked at that and been like, oh, not for me. There's none of that. But I think there's one thing just by matter of percentage, and this was a lesson that I learned through like dozens of relationships of not this. I underestimated how much it meant to me to have intellectual compatibility. Like that I love, and as does she, hence the, alignment thing. Like we both love sharing books with each other and being able to like have deep philosophical conversations by the fireplace. Literally, that's most of in the winter. That's just every night. And having a partner that I just adore talking to for hours on end and whose mind I really respect, that is something that came to me over many years and was kind of like a shadow projection of my intelligence. Was one of the bigger, with my sensitivity, was one of the bigger things that was like kind of bullied into suppression. And so I thought, and just, I'm good at being self-educated. I'm quite entrepreneurial. I was not made for the current elementary and high school default way of learning. So I thought I was really stupid in high school because I just hated the auditory first, just sit here and listen to someone talk for the most part. I really hated it. And then I found out, oh, if people just shut up and give me books, I will fly through them. And my retention is crazy high. I'm not dumb. I just hate how, at least the high school that I went to, how normal schooling is. And so, because of that, I didn't have intellectual compatibility with the majority of my partners through my teens and 20s. But then as I, like with the sensitivity thing, like with the emotionality thing, once I was aware of it and started going, oh, wedge of doubt, maybe this is a thing in me that I have at all and that I value in myself and others, then progressively the shift happened where I started loving talking to my partners, and that really, pinnacled with my wife. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm attracted to you. Cool. We like have work overlap and like, we have some of the on paper stuff, but just the fact that we can spend 8 hours, lounging on our big couch in front of the fire, talking about life and talking about, what are you learning lately? What are you reading? Do you like this book? How do you relate to like this former identity piece that's kind of burning off for you? And that we can just spend a lot of time in that place. Yeah. It took me many years to realize this really matters and it's allowed to matter. And it's not a superficial thing to want. That was my like last thing for myself, was like, is it shallow to like need someone to be at a certain level of intellect or conversational ability. And I just talked to some older friends who'd been married for decades, and I would just point blank ask them, like, when you bring a thing that you want, like, feedback on, an opinion on, when you bring this to your partner, 9 out of 10 times, are you glad that you did? And when enough of those adults said, yes, I value and appreciate their input and it's always spot on, like just hearing any adult say, yeah, that's a thing, and yes, I like it, and you're allowed to like that, I was like, okay, cool, I'll do that then, because I also want that, and that's allowed.
Yes, we just want permission to be able to embrace our full selves and want the things that we want, right? That they're real. And I'm curious whether there was a time when you're like, well, I don't have that, but there's all these other things that are good. So like, then that's good enough.
Totally. Where I tried to like shoehorn myself into a misaligned thing, 100%. I mean, that's what that 1.5 years, 9 breakups thing was. It was like, oh, come on, you're so close.
We're so close,
I
right?
think that can just be like a test. Life can be like, okay, can I get you to settle?
Yes.
Here's almost it. Is that enough for you? Are you going to lie to yourself and life forever and pretend that's fine for you when it isn't? Like, are you going to take the bait? I think life tests us a lot with potential partners, with, shiny objects in our career path, all these things of like, let's see if you're full of shit. Or like, if you actually have your own back and you mean it.
Yes. Right. Yeah. You say almost did. We say like almost, but not quite. Right. I'm curious whether you can see other areas of your life where universe presented you an almost it. And maybe you even entertained it and danced with it for a long time. And then at some point realize, no, that's not enough, or that's not it.
Yeah. 2 examples in my career path come immediately to mind. I've always had, I'm sure I've almost always had a lot less distractibility in that, even though those shiny objects were in some ways shinier. Like, yeah, there were 2 distinct things. One that was a very believable promise that was presented to me very early in my like online come up of like, hey, I'm like getting out there and, millions of readers. Yeah, I had someone with a very socially verifiable track record who was basically like, hey, if we partner on this thing that would be a misaligned deviation, content wise, but it would be drastically the fastest way for me to be making 7 figures a year while barely lifting a finger. Like the most passive, shiny object possible that would just feed me for years. But I knew enough about where my career was going and some things I'd heard about the person's integrity, which those things weren't like, oh, I won't actually get the money or like this won't pan out. They would pan out, but the ways that those things are achieved, it would just be like, hey, I know that you're literally 1% of the way through this marathon you're running. If we just move the finish line to like where your feet are now, and you can just stop and we'll say you've run a marathon, how about that? And I was just like, was it at all appealing to like, wow, I'm being very validated by like one of the biggest people in my industry, and I could just kind of stop now and like make literally retire by 26 years old money and just like coast forever. I gave it any thought, and it was like, okay, I think that would, it sounds very sexy. I understand why it's being presented to me, and I'd probably be depressed in under a year, because I think we need big, meaningful things to chew on for the long term. So there was that. And then there was another thing that I did that was a part of my business that I created, and it was doing exactly that level of revenue. It was a thing. It was a real tangible thing. And over time, it became misaligned enough that I shut it off. Like I killed it, even though it was doing 7 figures, like one product line. But I was like, you know what? I don't want to lead with this anymore. I don't want this to be the thing that I like. I'm doing big scaled marketing. I don't want this to be the thing that people like attach to me first and foremost. And so Old Yeller, I took it out back and shot it. I was like, okay, not this. I definitely see myself as like an artist and a creator more than a relationship coach. I think anyone with an artist heart, if you ask them and they're being honest, what kind of label they'd ideally like to have, like the most common answer is nothing. I don't want any label. I think as any kind of an artist, I think it's part of the job to keep your finger on the pulse of like, is this still true? Is this still true? Do I still want this? Is this still aligned? Or do I have to kill things and create new things? Like the death and rebirth cycle is incessant. There's no end to it. It's just a part of the dance forever.
Yes, a part of the dance forever. I really love the question, is this still true? Right? Is this still true for me? Because that thing that made you lots of money was true for a while, right? It was true until it wasn't. Maybe it started becoming less true. And, to have the willingness to stop and ask ourselves that question is so powerful, right? And listen to the answer and to know, hey, it's feeling less true, but not true enough to, end it all yet. What does this remind me of? Oh, I wanted to say, people who ask us or they state, I'm so worried about losing another 5 years of my life or like being stuck in this relationship for another 20. And like my gut always says, yeah, I have compassion. Like I get that. Who would want that? Right? I get that fear. And my sense is though, if we're willing to grow the muscle to bring presence to as many moments as we can and do that check-in, is this still true? And stay long enough to hear it and to feel it. And then act using that information. It's not really possible to like get stuck for another 20 years in the exact same thing. Right? So like that's what it reminds me of hearing you say, ask yourself, is it still true? Is this still the thing? Or has it changed?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to be said for like, you won't be in the same relationship, same marriage, same thing for even a month. Like if you acknowledge that every moment I can bring new dance steps to it, it isn't the same thing. Like if you're truly practiced at the death and rebirth cycle and you're just like, no, this is a benefit, it's a feature, it's not a bug. It's like, yeah, this is part and parcel. This is what the dance looks like. The number of times that I've momentarily been like, I'm just gonna take my website offline. I'm gonna shut this whole thing down. This is stupid. It's like, okay, what's actually happening? Is something misaligned and needs to be killed or shifted? And like have the new, it's January and we're recording this and we're in the Pacific Northwest. So it's like, we had to yank everything and all the roots out of our garden beds and like, kind of kill the garden to put it to bed for winter so that, soil can regenerate and be happy and we can create new things. But yeah, if you just like let it fester and there's weeds everywhere in your marriage, in your career, in whatever the thing is you're, transposing this onto, it's like, yeah, you don't have to be in the same thing for 5 years. Why would it be the same thing? Like, unless you're static, unless you're not growing in the slightest, which isn't me excusing bad behavior, which isn't saying stay in abusive relationships, blah, 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 all the caveats. But yeah, just like, okay, yeah, then don't. Change it today. Make a new decision.
In a way, I feel like that level of agency can feel very freeing and exciting and terrifying at the same time, knowing that at any moment I can change the steps to the dance.
Yep.
Me. Totally. And the dance will change.
Self-responsibility always feels exhilarating and terrifying. Welcome to life. Like that to me is just like, that's it. That's the water we're swimming in.
And it's the fresh maker of relationships too, right? Like this thing you're talking about being static, bringing the same thing to what is technically a different moment every single moment in space and time. The fresh maker is bringing your presence and your honesty and thank you.
While we're speaking of gardens and like, pulling out weeds, letting soil do its thing to regenerate, it made me think of like what's emerging in your life right now. So, yeah, if you want to share with us, like, what's an area of life you want to share a little bit with us? And if we could use more garden analogies, the rose, thorn, bud, right? What are two great things in that area of life? What's some part of it that's maybe clunky, challenging? And what's a bud? What's emerging?
It's a new model. I hadn't heard the rose, thorn, bud.
Nice.
So you said rose twice on purpose. So two
Rose,
things.
two things that are going well, feel good to you. One that's a thorn, it's like a bit challenging or clunky. And one that's a bud, it's something that's emerging. You don't know where it's going to go yet, but something's happening. There's energy there.
So it's interesting. So there's two roses and there's one thorn. So one of the roses is thornless. Lucky rose. Yeah, I'd say first rose is over this last calendar year, so last 12 months approximately. I have been reprioritizing fun and play in a huge way. I think the last 5 years with, global pandemic and fear and various other things that are not entirely mine to share, just there were a lot of big challenging things over the last 5 years, globally and other things in life. And yeah, the last year I've just been playing badminton. I've been going to the shooting range. I learned how to shoot guns and I've been loving that, which, for West Coast, laid back, very liberal Canadian was like, oh, I love this. How interesting is that? It's very meditative. I wouldn't have assumed that. Yeah, just like the fun, the play, the social connection, the hobbies that I've either re-picked up or been leaning into that are new things. That's been a big theme for the last year that I've been getting a lot out of. Second rose, the one with the thorn or not, we're not sure. I think, yeah, so my wife, after her kind of multi-year lean back, work hiatus, has been getting back into working the last few months, and she launched one thing and is launching another thing in 10 days from now. And it's been, again, I've no regrets or resentment. I think it was really great for both of us to, for her to really sink into that level of, is that a fly? There's a slow fly, a slow winter fly.
Hanging out by your roses.
Yes. So yeah, I think it's been fun watching her come back online in that part of herself, and that we get to be in the trenches together again and talk. Oh, what are you working on today? Oh, I'm working on this. Oh, that's cool. Can you read the first draft of this piece? Yeah, that's fun to be playing in that together again. So that's a big rose that, yeah, we both get a lot out of. Thorn is with a sticky or clunky thing, like an active challenge.
Yeah.
Thorn. I mean, it's definitely, it's in process. And I think, me individually, my wife individually, us especially as a couple, I feel pretty immediately when we identify a thing, we do things about it. And so, yeah, I'll say this and we'll see if it's cheating or not. But yeah, I just feel I don't tend to let things, once I'm actually aware of them, I don't let them simmer. So what was a thing a month ago that's still in process was we both realized we feel quite done with where we live. So we're in the process of selling our home and moving. And where we've lived served us very well for the last 3.5 years. And we thought, without question, we were oh, we'll be here for at least 30 years. We'll raise our kids here. And yeah, that started to shift for multiple reasons. And so, the notion you talked about, the self-responsibility piece being exciting and terrifying. We're oh, we hadn't even questioned this. Like this had been so like such a given, such a just like part of the obvious landscape. Yeah, it wasn't questioned at all for the last 3 years. And just the number of things that, there's like the gravity doesn't work moment of like, oh, everything's floating and up for grabs. And how interesting is this? So yeah, we like started having that conversation maybe even less than a month ago. And then, yeah, within the last week, we're like, oh, we should start like, downsizing our stuff, getting rid of things. We just had a huge moving sale 2 days ago. We had over 100 people. We live in a pretty small, 10,000 person little cute island town. And over 100 people came and basically like bought 100% of all of our furniture and stuff we were getting rid of. And yeah, there's already a lot of like flow, which even that I take into the consideration of alignment of like, if you think maybe this and life blocks you in, 18 different ways, I tend to give that serious consideration of like, okay, this is really sticky. And, God, life, universe is just like, I'm not testing you. I'm like protecting you. This isn't it for you. And so, yeah, while there's a lot of logistical overhead with our 120-year-old house that, has needed constant renovations and just a lot of consideration and, downsizing. I read the other day that the average household in North America has 300,000 things in it, like objects.
Wow.
And I heard that and I was like, there's no way that's true for us, like not even close. And then I started looking at our 2 buildings through the eyes of moving, and I'm like, okay,
There are.
there's a lot of things here. And we've been here, there's 2 of us, we've been here for 3.5 years. We're not a family of 5 who've been in the same house for 20 years. And at that point, I'm like, oh, you'd have at least 300,000 individual items in your home.
Imagine if you just sold each one for $1. Right? Like, I don't think we view like how much we consume through that lens.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like would everything get $1? Would each pen get $1? Would this jar lid get it? Like, yeah,
well, if you sold a pen with your TV for $2, like someone would go for it.
There you go. The bundle with the upsell. Perfect. $1 TV. Door crash for sale. Yeah. So, I'm excited about that. And a move, selling a house and will I say this yet? Yeah. We will be moving countries. So that's also like a lot comes with that. So yeah. I don't know if that qualifies all the way as a thorn, but it's a big thing that we're tracking that has 1,000 steps to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it qualifies as a thorn because at one point in time, you and her, like together, well, separately and together, you realize this is not working anymore. It's not working in the way we had envisioned or thought or was working.
Yes.
That to me is a thorn, right? Something's presenting
it served us deeply for who we've been over these last few years, where we can already see ourselves growing into. It won't be a fit for that. So
yeah, it won't be a fit for that. Where we see ourselves growing into, it won't be a fit for that. Imagine if everyone took away just that. I feel like that's very valuable. And we're on to bud. What's a bud?
Which is
I know there was lots of buds. Yeah, there was a lot of buds in just that one. But is there a separate thing in your life where you feel like, hey, something else is emerging?
Yeah, I would say my relationship with exercise and my body has been the most. Yeah, I've had more away from motivation seasons of relationships with exercise in my younger life. I feel like over the last, 8 or 9 months, I've been working out with a personal trainer 2 or 3 times a week, and something has shifted over this iteration of this thing that I'm like, okay, I love this. I don't think I'm going back. Wherever we move, I'll have a version of this still. And yeah, again, just like the different motivation, the different fuel source of early work of disproving worthlessness, early exercise of how do I not be my skinny teenage self who is always very skinny. It's like, how do I not be that? It's like, no, what if it's how do I have a strong, healthy, capable body so that I can, load in 4 rounds of wood to fuel our wood stove with total ease without ever worrying about whether my 6'7" back is going to like tweak about it. It's felt very slow and measured and progressive and grounded. And it's always been easy for me to invest in my mind, but my body, exercise wise, lifting weights, that's been a very easy thing for me historically to just put on the shelf and be like, it doesn't matter. Just, be smart, make money, fuck all the rest.
Yeah.
And there's been a shift with that over the last year that has been very enjoyable.
Love that. Enjoyable, things that feel good. It feels like life is orienting that way, right? There's a reason, like, I ask these questions, and what comes up for me is you said, I don't know if you use this word, but I took it out of what you said, is revisiting. Like, I know that you're revisiting play because I know there was a time in your life where that was a thing, and then probably other things came up and now you're revisiting play. I know that there was a time in your life where working out was a thing, and now it seems like it's coming back. And I wanted to just normalize, like, that's life, right? We do things, we sort of get off track with things because different things become priority, and then we can choose to revisit. We're going to have a different iteration. Your relationship with play is different, probably evolved from that last time you visited it. Your relationship with working out and body is different than the last time that you visit that area of your life. And all to say, like, to normalize, this is life. This is what happens.
Yeah,
there's no final destination.
We're seasonal beings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's I think there is and there should be seasonality to, how you eat, how you socialize, how you move, what your focus is in your career. Like, there just are summers and winters, and to be rigidly stuck in one way for years on end is completely unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
It's, no offense to anyone who's listening to this from this location, but like, I couldn't live in LA or any place that was just very sunny, basically year round. Like, for me, there's a soul staleness in not living in places that have 4 obvious seasons, because like, I like having the seasonality externally, tangibly felt, to remind me of the seasonality in me, and that there are times where I, push and strive and I'm growing in a more like overt kind of yang way. And there's ways where I'm just really coasting and really, or just, integrating, leaning into play, enjoyment, downtime, and not just like creation.
Yeah.
Seasonality.
Honoring seasonality. Well, if we honor seasonality like this, we're entering the season of this episode where we're wrapping things up. So we want to make sure you're out on time. I wanted to say, like, I wanted people to get a glimpse of like what the behind the scenes is like, and the in the mind and the body experience is like of someone who outwardly is very successful. If you look at your life on paper, you know your public image and who you are. It's easy to think you have no struggles. There's no thorns in your life. It didn't take you 5 years, 10 years to find movement in these things, that you had to revisit play many times, right? Like, we just want to help people see themselves in you, help normalize the human experience, right? And you said you would be willing to play along with us a little bit in a new tradition we're forming. So this new tradition is, would you be willing to leave a message to the next guest? And you don't know who the next guest is, and we don't actually know for sure who that will be yet either. A sweet message, or I guess it doesn't have to be sweet, but I'm assuming there'll be some sweetness to it, but to their inner child.
The point of life is to be happy. Don't forget to play. Any day above crisis is a great day. Don't take yourself too seriously.
I like that. So in that case, don't take yourself too seriously. That it gives me direction of which body practice to use.
I'm going to go with this one.
Yes. Can we go there? But just before we go there, is there anything else you want to say or let people know?
You're doing great. Like when you go to bed at night, only you know if you feel like you're really showing up honestly and giving your best, and your best is going to change day to day, season to season. But yeah, at least the majority of the people that come into my work and my world, they tend more to benefit from reminders of self-compassion. Like they're already pretty good at being hard driving and on it, and they've been self-developmenting for years. Yeah, it's not most people that come to me who are like need motivation, need to like, come on, like get up off the couch and do something. Yeah, there's a lot of like marathon runners, superhero syndrome people that I need to be like, it's all good. Like you're a person, you're a soft-bodied mammal. Relax your belly. Like give yourself any grace. Like it's okay.
Yeah. And on that note, can we make funny farting noises together?
We could always do that.
Are you doing this one? I don't think I can do that one. That's a good one.
There you go.
I can't do this one though.
Very dance practice.
Play. You wanted some play? We end with some play.
Really important to relax the belly when you're doing this practice.
Yes. So when I heard you say relax your belly, like soften your belly, I'm like, of course, if you're going to make farting sounds, you need to relax.
That's the main reason to soften your belly.
That's right.
You can't clench during that.
Oh.
Friend, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's a joy having you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It was super fun.
You want to let people know where they can find you?
Sure. The main hub is my website, jordangrayconsulting.com. Gray is Gray, but if you spell it either way, I own both, so they both point in the same direction. Jordan Gray Consulting, yeah, I've got 600 or 700 articles. I've got like a dozen video courses. I do one-on-one coaching for some people. It's not for most. But yeah, a lot of free resources that you can find there. There's Amazon books, but I don't talk about those because they're like 10 years old and I don't really care about them. But the articles, I write those all the time, so you can read a bunch.
What would it be like to have an anniversary book thing?
What do you mean? Of the existing books or a book about anniversaries?
No, the existing books. I wonder. I should buy one off Amazon and read it. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. I love your articles. I love your articles because they're very much reminding me it's okay to be human. And also, you do such a great job balancing self-compassion with like light a fire under your ass. And like, I feel like that's your special flavor. And so check them out if you haven't already.
I think I've told you I only read your, like, of all the crap that comes to my inbox, yours is the only thing that I read because it's genuinely helpful. It's a helpful tidbit based in like love and good, solid human advice. It's really nice, refreshing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And you, in saying that, you both just reminded me that, yeah, my email list is probably where I put the most energy. So yes, it sounds like you're both mainly referencing my emails. You can sign up to my list, jordangrayconsulting.com/list, or just go to almost any page on the website and you'll see where to sign up. Yes, I also send several emails per week, usually. Which is also free writing and just little life bumps of fire and compassion. So yes, also that.
Also that.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to say, Gigi?
No, that's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, then that's it for this week. Thank you guys for joining us. Please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. See you next time.
Bye.